Look at this steaming, glossy spoonful of baked beans, crispy bacon, and crumbled beef. If you've ever tried barbecue beans prepared like this, you know the taste is incredibly, intensely sweet. This specific profile is often described as to die for. But when you lay out the exact recipe required, a culinary contradiction appears. We have 14 ingredients in total going into this pot. Over half of these items, a full pound of ground beef, 6 strips of bacon, ground mustard, distilled white vinegar, garlic salt, and Worcestershire sauce, are aggressively savory, highly acidic, or heavily salted. Why does a cast iron pot filled with pungent meats and sharp, bitter spices yield a final dish that tastes overwhelmingly sweet? Reaching this level of sweetness requires more than just dumping in brown sugar. It involves the deliberate application of culinary contrast. The very first step of the recipe focuses entirely on the meat. We chop the bacon and cook it until it's crisp, then crumble in the ground beef, stirring until the pink is gone and deep pools of fat render into the skillet. This chart maps flavor intensity against time spent on the palate. If we only look at the liquid sugars in this recipe, like the honey garlic and the sweet and sour sauce, we see a sharp, narrow spike that drops back to 0 almost instantly. Liquids wash off the human tongue too quickly to register deeply. To fix that rapid drop-off, we rely on mouthfeel dynamics. When we introduce chewy, solid textures into a recipe, we force the mouth into a longer physical processing time. Notice how the second line stretches out. When sugars bind to solid foods, their duration on the tongue extends. The crunch of the crisp bacon and the dense chew of the ground beef act as physical traps for the sweet and sour sauce, ketchup, and brown sugar. They hold those liquids in place, keeping the sugars pressed against the palate for a prolonged period. The meats serve a functional purpose beyond their flavor. Their physical texture acts as the mechanical engine driving our extended perception of sweetness. Next, we drain off the grease and transfer those meats into a slow cooker. Here, they meet the beans, the acidic balancers like vinegar, and heavy amplifiers like brown sugar. Combining these pungent, salty, and sweet items triggers a biological principle known as flavor suppression, the specific way our tongue handles conflicting ingredients. This diagram shows an abstract model of the tongue surface. When we eat, the human body processes competing flavors through distinct, specialized receptors, shaped to accept specific molecular structures. The heavy salt, sharp acid, and dense umami molecules from the mustard, onion powder, and beef hit the tongue and physically bind to the bitter receptors first. By crowding into those receptors, these jagged molecules block other bitter compounds from entering. This effectively turns off the bitter signals, preventing them from reaching the brain. With the bitter interference neutralized, the sugar from the ketchup and honey garlic sauce has 0 competition. Those sweet molecules hit the remaining open receptors with 100% efficiency. But mixing these elements in a pot isn't enough. We have to cover the slow cooker and run it on high heat for exactly 1 hour. That sustained heat acts as a crucible. It breaks down the remaining tough fats locked inside the bacon and the ground beef, allowing those rich lipids to melt outward and coat the skin of every bean. Simultaneously, that temperature causes the heavy brown sugars to caramelize, penetrating deep into the cellular structure of those savory proteins. The savory ingredients knock out the palate's bitter defenses, while the heat merges the lipids and sugars. These steps pave the chemical and neurological pathways for sweetness to dominate the dish. When you finally take a bite of these finished beans, the resulting flavor feels like a surprise. That intense sweetness is the result of a highly engineered biological interaction. The brown sugar and honey certainly play their part, yet this dish achieves this level of sweetness because the savory ground beef, the salted bacon, and the sharp spices exist to support it. This reveals a broader rule in the kitchen. Great cooking rarely comes from piling on a single overpowering ingredient. It comes from building a structural architecture to support a specific flavor profile. To amplify the sweet notes in any future recipe, reach for a contrasting, savory texture instead of just adding more sugar.
True culinary mastery lies in understanding exactly how our palate processes that contrast. When you control the biology of the mouth, you can engineer the perfect bite.